Good morning. The story this morning is The Gift of Choices from the 24 Carat Buddha and Other Fables by Maxine Harris, publishers the Sidran Institute Press out of Baltimore, Maryland. The Gift of Choices. A long, long time ago, every village in the land was protected by its very own genie. The job of the genie was to watch over the people, but also to bestow a gift onto each newborn child. For a while, the genies vied with one another to see who among them could devise the most creative and spectacular gift. But after a while, most of the genies grew bored with gift-giving and resorted to giving each newborn 3 wishes to be used at any time during the child's life. But clever Lorna was not like the other genies. She wanted her gift to be something special, but also something that would challenge the villagers to think about their options in a different way. Knowing how difficult it was for humans to make decisions, Lorna decided to grant the villagers under her care 3 perfect choices. This meant that when a villager was trying to make an important decision, he or she could use one of the perfect choices and thus guarantee that the decision would have the optimum outcome. The villagers were pleased that Lorna wanted to give them a unique gift, but most of them did not really understand what they had been given. Most of them, you see, thought the choices were no different from wishes, and they treated their new gift much as they would have treated the old promise of 3 wishes. Lorna had hoped that the villagers would come to see that decisions should be treated with great respect, because sometimes the course of an entire life can rest on even a very small decision. Only one young girl among all the villagers seemed to comprehend the magnitude of the gift she had been given by the clever genie. The girl, who was called Wide Eyes by her friends, would often stare into the open space with great, big, wide eyes that seemed to perceive a future others could not. Wide Eyes was excited by her gift and was determined to use her 3 perfect choices wisely. She would not waste her choices on silly things like which dress she should wear to the village gathering or what she should prepare for her bridal supper. She would reserve her choices for really big decisions. But that's where things began to get confusing. For how was one to tell what was a really big decision? She remembered her friend, who was called Little Feet, who had used one of her perfect choices to select a dress for the village gathering. She chose a dress that was so beautiful that Little Feet attracted the attention of the chief's only son and was soon chosen to become his wife. Perhaps choosing a dress was a big decision after all. No, she thought. How silly of me. It is just a coincidence that she was selected to marry the chief's son. Choosing a dress cannot possibly be worthy of using one of the perfect choices. As she grew older, Wide Eyes spent many long hours thinking of how she would use her choices. She was not quite sure which decisions were really important, but she felt sure that she would know an important decision when she encountered one. When she turned 18, Wide Eyes decided to leave her village and travel to the village of her mother's older sister, who was known to be a wise woman. Wide Eyes wanted to consult her aunt about how she might use her choices. As she left the woods surrounding her village, she came to a fork in the road that she had never seen before. She wondered out loud, should I take the road to the left or the right? Perhaps this was a decision that was big enough to use one of her perfect choices. No, she thought, this is just a little decision. What difference can it possibly make which road I choose? So she picked up her silk purse, in which she kept her perfect choices, and she walked up the path to the right. As she climbed the steep path, the weather grew more and more ominous. A strong wind began to blow, making it difficult for Wide Eyes to keep her balance. She was about to sit down and think about what to do when she heard a voice calling her from behind a tree. "Come with me, and I will show you a cave where you will be safe from the wind," said the young man as he emerged from behind the tree. "Oh dear," thought Wide Eyes. "What shall I do? This man is a stranger who might wish me harm, but I do need help in climbing this path. Perhaps I should use one of my perfect choices. No, this is a little decision. I will go with the young man and save my choices for something really important." So off she went. The young man was quite kind and charming. Wide Eyes went with him to the cave and eventually to his village. She stayed with him and his family for many months, and the two fell in love. When the young man asked her to marry him, Wide Eyes once again wondered if she should use one of her perfect choices to make what surely seemed to be an important decision. But by this time, Wide Eyes had become so attached to saving her choices and so convinced that things just seemed to work out that she told the young man she would marry him if that was what he really wanted. Many years passed. Wide Eyes stayed in the village of her husband, gave birth to 6 children, lost 2 of them to illness, learned to weave beautiful blankets, took a young warrior as her lover, quarreled with her husband's sister, and watched as her hair turned gray with the passing years, but never found a decision big enough to warrant using one of her perfect choices. When she was a very old woman, Wide Eyes had occasion to meet an old man who had been a boy in the village of her family when she herself was a young girl. "Come sit with me," she called to the weary villager, "and tell me of my family. So much has happened since you left, and I hardly know where to start. Shortly after you left to visit your aunt, a terrible storm came and flooded all land on the left side of the fork in the road. Many people were killed. In order to rebuild our village, we formed an alliance with another chieftain. Your father was asked to pledge his oldest daughter to the chieftain's son. But since you were not to be found, your sister married the young man. He was quite a tyrant. But when he died in battle years later, your sister became our ruler and is now much revered." "Stop, stop," cried Wide Eyes. "I do not want to hear any more. It's too confusing to imagine a different life from the one I have had. Perhaps those things would have happened to me if I had used my perfect choices." "Ah, yes," mused the old man. "The perfect choices. How did you use yours after all?" "Why, I haven't used them," said Wide Eyes. "I never found anything important enough to warrant using the gifts of the genie. They are still here in my silk purse." But when she opened the bag to show her old friend, the two saw nothing inside the faded bag but dust. The additional reading. The gift of choices. Decisions are difficult for most of us, but they are especially hard for individuals who have sustained a significant loss, betrayal, or trauma in childhood. In an abusive or dysfunctional family, a child often grows up in a world in which someone else makes all or most of the decisions. The child is given no chance to decide for him or herself, so it becomes silly to think of oneself as a person who has the authority and the skill to make decisions. As adults, many of us turn over decision-making power to anyone and everyone. Rather than seeming like opportunities, decisions feel like unscalable mountains. So instead of even beginning the climb, we merely sit and look up at the mountain and wait. Sometimes we have the unfortunate experience of making a big decision that appears to have disastrous consequences. We may then become even more tentative about future decisions. We say to ourselves, what if I make a mistake and something worse happens? Better not to decide at all. But as Wide Eyes learns in the story, one cannot help but decide. We make decisions every day in so many little ways, and there is no way to know for certain what constitutes a big decision or a small one. The fork in the road may be inconsequential, or it may represent the decision that determines the rest of one's life. Just as there are no small decisions, there is no way to avoid deciding. We make a choice when we decide not to decide. And as Wide Eyes learns, we use our choices even when we try not to. Thank you for listening.